You're listening to Business Success in a Virtual World podcast. If you are a leader navigating these new immersive technologies, this is your definitive resource to understand the innovative power of XR, VR, and AR. I'm Tim Beharon, Chairman of Creative Strategies, and I'm joined by Barton Goldenberg, President of ISM Guide. In each episode, we navigate through new products, effective strategies, and highlight actual business case studies implementing extended reality into business processes. Our resource website now boasts over 300 case studies, 300 articles, and 100 videos presenting successful examples of businesses using these technologies in field service, training, digital twins, customer service, in medical and manufacturing, and so much more. Check out the website at ismguide.com. Now, on to the next episode. This week, we have a little bit of a different focus. Normally, we do case studies and we talk about what's going on with major companies who are already using VR, XR, and AR. But as a part of what we and Barton and I together have been doing is we also created what we call the Metaverse Resource Center. And that has been up for about 2.5 years now. And it's become a really good resource center for anything that is focused on AR and VR. And we're in the process of refocusing it. And in a minute, I'm going to turn it to Barton and he can explain to you. But bottom line is, in October of 23, OpenAI introduced the concept of AI. A year before that, Mark Zuckerberg introduced the concept of the metaverse. So we started the Metaverse Resource Center right after Zuckerberg announced the metaverse concept, and more specifically, how Meta, or how in that case it was Facebook at that time, how Meta was going to champion that cause. They changed their name to Meta, and all of a sudden the metaverse became a huge concept and became a bigger umbrella term for anything was going on in that area. Fast forward to where we are today. And the concept of the metaverse, while is still valuable, has transitioned to another term called spatial computing. Now, Apple has helped drive that, especially because of the introduction of the Vision Pro, which at the moment is literally delivers the best experience in spatial computing from the standpoint of visuals, resolution, capabilities, etc. And Apple's actual focus on spatial now has become the more umbrella term for what's going on. The Metaverse Resource Center itself is a valuable tool, but we believe it's time now to refocus its energy and expand what it can do. So with that, I'm going to ask my partner Barton, who's really the host of this on ismguide.com, to share a little bit about our thinking and why we're moving it and changing the name of it, and more importantly, what the objective is. Barton?
Well, thank you, Tim. It's always nice to hear from my Silicon Valley partner who has a great depth of experience in all that takes place. And this whole discussion that we're having right now, in part, is driven by Silicon Valley thinking. And why do I say that? Because metaverse is somewhat out of favor at this time. Tim has already alluded to the fact that metaverse kind of came from Meta, which was a Zuckerberg concept, a Zuckerberg company. And let's just say it the way it is. Zuckerberg is not always the number one fan and favored prodigy inside the Valley. So there was always a skepticism by companies, including Apple and others, not even to use the term metaverse. So we added on to it in 21, 22, NFTs, non-fungible tokens. We added onto it virtual real estate. We added onto it all kinds of things. And quite honestly, the venture capital was flowing into metaverse companies, and it looked like it had a bright future. But then came this transition where Apple came out with the Vision Pro, OpenAI came out with generative AI, and it really put into question how these technologies fit or didn't fit with metaverse. And long story short, they somewhat surpassed metaverse, and the valley dropped to a large extent the metaverse name. And as Tim alluded to at Augmented World Expo, at Consumer Electronics Show, all these tracks are now called spatial computing. So that, as Tim alluded to, is somewhat more of the umbrella term. And spatial computing does convey the next generation of technology and use cases in very important areas, including medicine, architecture, design, digital twin technology, virtual reality training, and many, many sales, marketing, and customer service applications. So spatial computing has its reason to exist. It's a good umbrella term at this time and is likely to continue, we think. You add to this change from metaverse to spatial computing the growing impact of artificial intelligence on augmented reality and virtual reality and mixed reality. And all of this led to some reflection on behalf of Tim and I, where we felt that the Metaverse Resource Center, this center that we put together that contains in excess of 300 articles, 300 videos, and a whole bunch of case studies, use cases. So, sorry, it's 300 use cases and more than 300 articles, and I think there's a little over 200 videos now. But we decided that we should be putting more and more articles about artificial intelligence and its impact on sales and marketing and customer service and medicine and architecture and VR training, etc. We also felt it was important to post more material on AI's impact on augmented reality and virtual reality, mixed reality, extended reality, and we've done that. For those of you that are familiar with the Metaverse Resource Center, we have a large group now of AI-driven articles and even spatial computing articles. So it just was a matter of time. And we felt it was the time to make this change from the XR Metaverse Resource Center. Tim, would you start the drum beat now, please? The Metaverse Resource Center to AI and Spatial Computing Resource Center. So we are proud to announce that the Metaverse Resource Center has moved on, has evolved to AI and Spatial Computing Resource Center. And that's the story, Tim.
So we're excited about this transition, but to be honest with you, we were kind of forced to do it. As an analyst, I have been, and also one who's been known about really dealing with and writing a lot about the metaverse over the last 2.5 plus 3 years. I've gotten an immense amount of questions on how does AI impact metaverse / spatial computing. And the more we study it and the more we look into it, it's very clear that that's an important part, or the role AI is going to play is important in the concept of how the metaverse / spatial computing will evolve. Another key point on that term spatial, even though Apple was the one who championed it, the reality is both the metaverse and spatial computing hinted of what is really the key of anything to do with XR and AR, and that's the immersive experience, which is why you can make the transition from metaverse to spatial pretty easily, because it still has its roots in the concept of immersive, which is what VR, XR, and AR is all about. The other thing is, as of right now, the Metaverse Resource Center itself, as it exists, has well over 300 case studies and 300 articles on how people are using it today. And that's not going to change. Even though we've added the name AI and Spatial Computing Resource Center, we're going to continue doing the same type of things where we're not only talking about how people are using XR and AR, but we will also be talking about how people will be integrating AI into XR and AR. this is a really big change in the sense of the future of immersive computing. Now, there's been a lot of skepticism because the metaverse has kind of taken a hit as a bad term. And you're supposedly not seeing a lot of activity in it. That's just not true. The Metaverse Resource Center shows so deeply how much, how many people are already using it in medicine, in manufacturing, in a CRM. And you go through the case studies that we've listed here, and you'd be hard pressed to say nobody's using it. And then when you now look at going forward, every case study that we see there is going to have to grapple with the question of how can AI make this better? And that's a big deal. That's why, from our standpoint, we felt that the Resource Center needed to take an additional focus, marry the two, and going forward, even though we probably will have some dedicated MR cases or mixed reality slash XR cases and VR cases for things like manufacturing and medicine, et cetera, we will also be looking for and talking to companies and interviewing people who already have this. And we may, for example, reach out to a company that we already profiled and say, how are you using AI? And because every company, literally, and I'm getting this from all sides of our business specifically, are asking the question, what do I do with AI? Why is AI important? What should I be doing going forward? And in a lot of cases, they've already come up with how they're going to use it. In CRM, it's going to be a very key component. And Barton, I'm going to throw that one to you because we just did a project regarding AI in CRM. And give us just a little bit, we don't name the company, but how and what that company needed and how we reacted to that.
Yeah. I'd be happy to do that. I want to make a point though before that. One of the things that Tim and I are quite excited about, and I think the industry is as well, is the symbiotic relationship between artificial intelligence and what is spatial computing. And we'll talk about this and interview people about this, but in a nutshell, AI is going to provide deep insight into the various applications that will be used within the spatial computing umbrella. And the data that's gathered within that spatial computing umbrella will feed more relevant information into AI servers that can be inferenced to then feed back into AI, into a spatial computing application. So this symbiotic relationship is fascinating, and we are going to dig deep and look at it. Now, to answer Tim's question, we had the pleasure of working with one of the top credit agencies worldwide in the last few months. And it's always a funny story how these things work. But the executive came down and said to the contact center, we need to apply more AI into the center to do two things. One, to drive down costs, and two, to hold or increase customer satisfaction. And, he wasn't absolutely sure, the executive, why and how this would play out, but he had the foresight, at least, to encourage the contact center and other parts of the organization to look into this. And so what Tim alluded to is we came into this company and we created an end-to-end process map of how a call or a web form or an email or a old-fashioned mail would come into this contact center and ultimately get resolved either through a chatbot or an agent that might take the phone call. And when you look at the cost of deflecting a call and using a chatbot at about 30 cents a call versus letting the call flow through to the agent at about $3 a call to resolve, it's quite apparent that there's a reason why we should use AI and some of the new technologies in the contact center, both to drive down costs as well as to drive up or hold or drive up customer experience. So we did the end-to-end process map, which in itself is always a fascinating thing to do, just to look at how things flow, or for that matter, don't flow all the time perfectly. And then we identified 41 individual places within the process map where AI could impact either cost reduction, drive efficiency into the process, and or increase customer experience. And those 41 were then put onto what is called a horizon timeframe. So looking at how do we prioritize, organize, and then implement those 41, or some subset of those 41 AI identified areas. And it was a tremendous success. Now, the interesting thing is, or at least we were challenged with, is how do we identify those areas? And we used three different sources. One source was they're working with this company's global, very large. They're already working with some fairly established vendors on both the CRM side, on the telephony side, on the knowledge management side, and other areas. And so we went out to the various vendors and said, what are your plans for AI? And how are you going to apply that to the contact center and to incoming calls or web forms or emails or voice calls? So that was a source, the actual vendors, because we have to be respectful of where they were headed. We also had an ability now to go back into this company, and they were already thinking about how could we use, in this particular case, largely some of the AI technology to deflect calls, to drive down costs, but also to be there 24/7 so that we could drive up the customer experience. And so that was our second source, using internal company reflection and brainstorming sessions, etc. And then Tim and I have been around for, a mere 80 years between the two of us and doing what we do. And we have a very good network of friends in the industry. And so we just canvassed ourselves and our friends and said, hey, given this kind of scenario, where could AI be used? And we came up with our own thinking. So with those three inputs from the vendors, from within the company, and from our industry knowledge, we were able to identify those 41 areas of potential use of AI impacting CRM.
And what's important about that is while Barton and I have been working with companies on the concept of XR, AR, and VR integrated, especially into things like training and other stuff, we're also now using and helping them with that really big question. And what Barton pointed out, that the management of this particular company basically sat back and said, we got to do something with AI, and he hands it over to his staff, and they look at each other and go, what do we do? How do we do it? And we're capable, together with some of our partners as well, to help do that as a part of the integration and the understanding of how to use AI in call centers, CRM, etc. But what's interesting is we are also, with these kind of companies, then linking them to, okay, and then we're asking the question, are you using AR, VR for things like training? Are you using AR and VR for etc.? And that becomes like a secondary big thing. And then we marry the two ultimately as a part of where we'll go long-term with them or anybody else. Couple other thoughts about this. When both of us are sitting here with many years of experience, and Barton especially in CRM, and me is in the world of technology, we are in a unique position to understand not only where we came from and where we are, but to some degree where we're going. And in a week or so, we will do a podcast specifically on our predictions, specifically for 2025 and 2026. So I encourage you to come back for that. Another thing that I want each of us to talk about here is, believe it or not, CES is only a few weeks away. And on January 6th, both of us are flying to Las Vegas, where the next morning, Barton and I are opening the track at CES on spatial computing. My session starts at 9 a.m. and I'm going to be dealing with the concept or the big picture of what's new and what's the future of XR, VR, and AR headsets. The track itself will talk a lot about AR and VR apps and services, etc. But we start the thing out, or our track out, dealing with the question of AR and VR vehicles. And in this case, it really focuses on things like goggles, specialized headsets, and I'm adding this year, which I didn't do it last year, AR glasses. Because in the last year, AR glasses have really kind of come to the forefront. Now, we're not anywhere near, I think, the true AR glass concept that's envisioned, where all of the data is actually in the screen and the glasses, but there's still an immense evolution. And on my panel, I have a top executive from Lenovo, top executive from Meta, and I'm really pleased to have a top executive, and it happens to be a guy I know really well, from Snap, who've been doing these glasses for 3 years. So my session's at 9, and then Barton, I'm going to hand it to you because you follow me with another session, and tell us about your session.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So mine will, as Tim has already alluded to, he's the technology guy, and I'm kind of the CRM or business side. So my panel will be the application of spatial computing to CRM, in effect. And we'll talk about pragmatic examples of companies doing that right then and there. And we have a panel of, I have a panel of 3 very distinguished executives. One is the chief technical officer globally for Siemens Corporation out of Germany. One of them is a very senior executive for American Honda, the automotive company. And the third one is in the medical field, a leading authority on the application of AI, VR, AR, and XR in medicine, Dr. Harvey Castro. And so we have a tremendous panel where we're going to ask, how is Honda approaching AI and spatial computing in its business? And how is Siemens applying AI and spatial computing in their business? And how is the medical field applying AI and spatial computing? Not how today, but it's already there. But in all of these cases, how is it likely to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? So it should be a fascinating discussion. And the fact that we're back to back, Tim, for those that are able to stay in both sessions, it should be a really insightful, what's coming in terms of the technology, and then how are we going to be applying that? So I'm quite excited about this.
Yeah, it's again, CES itself is going to be quite exciting this year because they're expanded a lot of stuff. If to find out the details of this, of where our sessions are, it'll be in the flyers and in the material that you have from CES in the conference sessions, and you'll see a dedicated track on just spatial computing and XR, AR, and VR. And in that particular context, because Barton and I will be there, and we're going to also go walk the floor and play with a lot of toys, the following podcast that we'll do after our predictions will be our report on CES. We think that the next year especially will be a very important year of marrying AI and spatial computing. There's an immense amount of activity that we're already seeing. We're going to see a lot more companies say, how do we do X with Y? We're going to be there to help you through the podcast and potentially, if you need help, to help guide you going forward on this exact issue. And we're hearing this all over, and at almost every level. I'm interested in XR and VR for training. I'm looking at it in CRM, but I also need to look at AI. What do I do first? What do I do second? How do I marry the two? And I think that that's going to be one of the big themes of 2025 and 2026, specifically in this particular area. Well, with that, thank you for joining us. We look forward to you joining us again when we do our forecasts and predictions in the next week or so. And thank you for being with us on this week's podcast. Thanks for listening to Business Success in a Virtual World. Barton and I have helped global companies successfully develop and implement strategies to utilize these new technologies. For more information or to contact us, please visit ismguide.com and select Metaverse Resource Center. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred platform.